Dave da, Ewi Nakan. Welcome to podcast number 29. I hope you all having a good Easter. Weather was handsome today. I'm recording this late on Good Friday, which goes against all that I said in last week's podcast. I don't know if you remember or no, but I said that I didn't like recording late on the evening in case I get a call during the night. And was I tempting fate or was I tempting fate? Because the next 3 nights after recording that podcast, I was called out in the middle of the night. Monday morning wasn't so bad. I think it was about 1:30, and it was a local nursing home, so that was fine. Sunday morning wasn't so bad because that was a local house as well. That was about 3 o'clock in the morning. But Saturday morning, it was a little different because we had to actually go up to England, and we had a call. It was about 3:15 in the morning, and we had to go to Plymouth. And I think we got back about 6:10. So that was all the sleep gone for that day. It is quite common, really, for us to be travelling anywhere around Cornwall these days for people that have passed away in care homes, because there's so few in the Wadebridge area now. I can remember years ago, we had loads in Wadebridge. There was like Thorncliffe and Pendennis up Fernley Road, Pennybryn, High Point Lodge, and then out Rockway we had Olive House and Trelawney, and then Padstow Travone you had Bowen House, Dobbin House, and Dinas, which changed its name to Anethy Lowen, and they've all gone. And in Wadebridge now, the only care home we've got is St Breoch, and we've got a couple out at St Minver, a few in Bodmin, Llanivet, but like I say, you know, we do get people that families have lived all their lives in area here, but with no available spaces, they could be, you know, placed anywhere in Cornwall. So this is something that is not unusual anymore. One memory I do have of nursing homes that sticks in my mind was a new one was opening up in our area, and they were going to have their open day on a Saturday, 11 o'clock. And they gave us a frantic phone call 10 o'clock, an hour before this was going to happen. And at that time, they just had one resident in the home who was, I think, a family friend. And so sadly, he actually passed away an hour before their open day with, you know, all the dignitaries and everything was going to be there. So it was a case of, can you come quickly? So we had to go and bring the chap back into our care. But that's one thing that I will remember. So back to last weekend. So we had, you know, the calls on Saturday morning and Sunday morning, as I said. And then later Sunday morning, I had to do me 20-mile training run for the marathon, the last long run. And I thought, crumbs, I don't know how this is going to go, because I thought I'm going to be a bit tired. But to be honest, it didn't go too bad at all for me. I had James running with me. A lot of you might know he's been struggling with a knee injury, and the week before he only got to mile 13 is quite a few miles, but he got to mile 13 when his knee started playing up. So we thought he rested it quite a bit during the week, and then he thought if he ran with me, it would force him to go perhaps a bit slower, because he's a lot faster than me, and perhaps that would, you know, ease the knee kind of thing. But when we was getting between mile 10 and 11 Dearven, he had to stop again. So we don't know quite what's happening with him at the moment for the marathon. But myself, I say it went fine. I did my long run, so now I'm tapering down. But I'd just like to thank everyone that's donated so far. I think we're just under £1,500, which is fantastic, seeing it's only been going, 2 or 3 weeks, if that. So thank you so far for everyone. If you haven't heard, we're raising money for Fleet, which is equipment for all the emergency services, medical equipment sort of thing, and for, all the services here in Cornwall. And it's a worthwhile thing. So if anybody wants to, just go on our Just Given page, David and James Bray, and to be much appreciated. One thing I don't think I mentioned last week, we carried out a funeral of a lovely chap that we'd known for quite a few years, and him and his late wife, they both took out funeral plans with us a few years before, telling us exactly what they wanted, kind of thing. And he said to me, I want to make sure that I make them smile at my funeral. So that's what we did. There was a good crowd there. And as everyone was filing out at the end, the curtain stayed open at the crematorium, and he'd asked us to put a little sign, a little poster on the end of the coffin rather, as everybody went by so they could see it. And it said, "I'm not in here through choice." And I say it had the result that he wanted. Everyone went away with a smile. As far as funerals go this week, we've been Glyn Valley a few times, Bodmin Methodist Church, and also Eglesale. And we had a burial at St Tudy where we had the horse-drawn hearse again. So the sun was shining and it was a lovely sight. We stood there outside the cemetery gates, and to see the horses come round the corner, it was a lovely sight. And then we had a trip down to Penmount end of the week, which was almost the perfect storm, really, because, as I said, 'tis half term down here, bank holiday, Easter holidays, and it was the Thursday before Good Friday, and we met into Penmount mid to late morning. And what have we got? Roadworks up outside the showground. So I think it took us half hour to get out of town. And it reminded me of the old days when we just went Penmount all the time in the summer in the traffic. So we got there safely on time. But that brought back a few memories, I tell you. We've got part of the scaffolding up now to repair the roof. In case you didn't know, we had a storm a few weeks ago, and one of the wrought iron finials blew off, and it is hang of a weight, and he made a hole in the roof, damaged the other roof, damaged the wall, and we was going to hang on to a bit later in the month to get all the scaffolding up to replace the finial, the one that went down, or do we not replace it and do we take the other one down? We're going to check the other one to see how safe that is, because 'tis a bit of a worry, because they are a heck of a weight, and the last thing you want is it coming down on top of anyone. So it might end up we take the other one down. If not, we'll make sure that both are safely secured. But end of last week, we had torrential rain, and you wouldn't believe there was just like a couple of slates gone in our main roof, and God, the water was coming in. It came down through 2 floors. The electric was going. So they've brought forward the scaffolding for that bit anyway, and at least the hole will be fixed this week. But I was thinking that perhaps, with the repairs to the chapel and that, perhaps this week I'll talk about when we actually bought the chapel, which was a bit of a roller coaster, a few sleepless nights, I'll tell you, but I think that's what I'll talk about today. As a lot of you can most probably remember, when we started, we were sharing Bridge End with Ronnie Williams and the building side of the firm. So to start off with, we shared the office. I was in the office there with Dennis Irons. He was working for Ronnie. And then in the back room, they had a store. And then we had our chapel of rest. We had our little mortuary. And that was it, really. And then gradually, Ronnie sold the building side. So then we were sharing with Roger Coleman for a while. But then after that, he moved across the road to the old paint shop. So then we kind of took over all of the ground floor. And of course, we had the cellar downstairs, which we stored the coffins. Initially, their old store, we turned into my office. So I would be in the back working there. And then the flat became empty up above, so we got planning to convert it to a business. So then my office then went upstairs, and then my old office became a second chapel of rest. So we had 2 chapels of rest. we built an extension downstairs as well. So the workshop where we made the coffins, furnished them and everything was all downstairs as well. And 'twas like a little TARDIS, really. You wouldn't believe. We had the 3 levels, and you wouldn't believe how much space we had. But I could see as the years was going on, we were outgrowing it, and I was looking for somewhere else to buy, perhaps a residential place on the outskirts of town, sort of thing that we could convert. But as a lot of you know, the house prices in all of Cornwall, not just Wadebridge, is very expensive, and I never found anything that would be appropriate. And just 100 yards across the road from us was Wadebridge Methodist Church, and that had been empty for, I suppose, 4 or 5 years. I'm not too sure, really. It'd been, let to go down a little bit, and then it had been put up for sale, and was a bit of a beggar, really, because we used to kind of park our cars in the car park there, and they put the chapel up for sale by sealed bids. So if you don't know Wadebridge or know the chapel, it was one of the biggest ones in the area, really. Quite an impressive building. When I started, there were Methodist chapels all over in the little villages in the middle of nowhere, little hamlets and that. Everywhere seemed to have a Methodist church. And sadly, slowly, one by one, a lot of them have closed down now. And this one at Wadebridge, we used to have quite a few funerals there, and you could seat, 100 easy downstairs. They had a gallery upstairs. Then they had a little link building, and then they had the Wills Memorial Hall attached to it as well, which they used to have functions in and hire out for badminton, or I think Wadebridge Melvoice Choir used to practice there in the evening. So it was quite a building, really. And when it came up for sale, I thought, I'd love that, but I thought tis too big a project for me, really. And we'd heard that 2 bids had been put forward, and just, it was almost like it was meant to be. One day, Peter Smith, he was the minister at the time, and he just popped his head in the door as he was going by, and he said, "We haven't sold the chapel yet, mind." He said, the cut-off time is next week. So I think he was hinting like, do you want to go for it? But I said, right on, and didn't make no more of it. Anyway, what happened then, like I say, it was almost like it was meant to be. That evening, I already had a planned meeting with my accountant, and we went through all the business and everything. And then I just happened to mention it to him about this, and he said, "Yeah, go for it. Yeah, you can go for that." Now, I don't think at this point he realised what plans I would have for the work involved. But I thought, well, if he thinks I can go for it, I will. So I rang Peter the next morning. I said, "Here, what you said yesterday?" I said, "I think we will put in a bid." So he said, "Well, I can't tell you what the others have bid." I said, "No, that's fine. I mean, the asking price, they was open for about 300,000. And I don't know. I mean, the rumour at the time, I don't know if it is true, I've never asked, to be honest, was that 2 bids had already been put in. One, the rumour was that it was Wetherspoons to make it into a pub like they had with Bodmin Methodist Church. And the others was that it was developers who would most probably knock it down and build flats or something on it, because the chapel itself, it was built in 1875, but it wasn't listed at all. So anyway, we put in our sealed bid, and we got the highest bid, which was fantastic. So I said, well, we'll buy it as long as we obviously get the planning permission. So that was the next step. So I drew a little plan of exactly what I wanted. I think it was on the back of envelope of it. I'm sure it was. And I wanted to put it upstairs in, because there was no upstairs at all, just the little gallery. So we met Andy, the architect. I walked around with him. I give him my little sketch. I said, right, this is what I want. And he took it away, and he come back about a month later. Fantastic. He had exactly what I wanted. So the next thing was to apply for planning, but also all the time we were dealing with, as well as the planning side, we were dealing with the trustees of the Methodist Church up in Manchester, talking about the sale of the building. And I'm sure they only met, I think, every quarter, so every 3 months. So they'd send a question down, and then we'd get the answer. We'd send it back to them, and then we'd have to wait a couple of months, and then they'd send another question down. So it was quite a time-consuming thing, really. And I'm sure it was definitely over 12 months before, it was agreed that we could buy it, and we had planning permission. So my next trip was to the bank manager. So my first trip to him, I actually did get in touch the day that I said that we would put a bid in. And dear of him, he did see me quite quickly. And I went over and I told him what I was doing. And he said, no problem. He said, whatever you want, you can have. I thought, fantastic. So I was happy. So away I went, and then everything started, all the planning and that. And I say it must have been over 12 months later. We were getting ready then to officially buy it. So I rung up the bank manager again. I said, can I come over sometime? We want to sort all the finances out now. And he said, funny you ringing. He said, I was going to ring you. He said, I've been promoted. But he said, I got a nice young chap here now. He's taken my job. So he said, you come over. I'll introduce you to him. So I said, okay. So I went over and I sat down, and I can remember his words to this day. He introduced me to this young new chap, and he said, whatever David wants, he can have. They've been with us forever. He can have whatever he wants. I thought, fantastic. So this young chap said, right, well, I wouldn't mind having a meeting with you, really. So have a look around the chapel. So I said, that's fine. I said, we've got the keys, because we always had the keys to the chapel in case anybody needed to get in, services or that over the years, electric, water, whatever. So a day or two later, I met him at the chapel. And this is where I got the inkling that perhaps it wasn't going to be all plain sailing. I spent, it must have been 2.5 hours with him. We was walking around the chapel, and I told him all the plans that I had, everything I wanted. And he looked at me and he said, well, what can you do in this building that you can't in the other? And I thought, hang on a minute. We got a chapel here. I wanted to, if I run through everything that I wanted to do, then put it that way, which we've got now. So you would go in the foyer, and we kept half of the chapel. So we've got seats for 80 people that we have services there. We got the little reception. We got a big office then, 3 chapels of rest, a really big state-of-the-art mortuary. And then at the back, we got a coffin store. We got the workshop for the coffins. And then we go into the Old Wheels Memorial Hall, which is now our garages. And then I've put upstairs in. So upstairs, we've got 2 offices for funeral arrangements. We've got a coffin display area that we've got all the different types of coffins that we provide that people can look at. And we got a function room with a fully equipped kitchen, which can also double up. So if we got more than 80 people downstairs to a service, we can easily get another 50 upstairs, and they watch it on the TV. And when you think what we had across at Bridgend, and he said to me, well, what can you do here that you can't? I thought, this ain't going to be such plain sailing as I thought it was going to be. So anyway, we left the meeting, waited a few days, or it could have been a week or 2, and then he come back. He said, sorry, Mr. Bray, your request has been turned down by the bank. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, we'll just do bit by bit. I said, perhaps if we just do the chapel now, and then we could do the garage bit later on. He said, no. He said, I'm afraid they don't think it's feasible. So I thought, oh, crumbs, what do I do now? Because I put in the bid and everything, and a few sleepless nights then, I can tell you. So I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then somebody said, well, why don't you try another bank? So they said there's a bank just down the road, lovely chap in there, and or is it up the road? Yeah, up the road. And go and speak to him. So I give him a phone call. So we had a meeting, and dear Paul, he was exactly the same as my old bank manager in the other bank. So 'twas all systems go. So that was fine. So then what happened then, we started obviously transferring over, because I thought, right, I'm obviously got to change everything to this new bank. So we started, transferring everything over. Well, the next thing, I got the big area manager of the old bank on the phone to me. Oh, Mr. Bray, I hear you're changing banks. So we went through everything, and he said, I have to apologise. He said, the new chap, it was the first time that he had put a proposal through to our credit part of the bank, and he said it was his fault that you were turned down. He said it was the way that he did it, and he said, I've looked at it, and he said, whatever this new bank has offered you, he said, we will match it. And I said, sorry, mate. I said, it's been quite stressful, and I'm happy, going with this new one now. Thanks, but no thanks. So we transferred everything over to this new bank. So it was now all systems go. So we got hold of the builders, and they started, and they was cracking on. Everything was going fine, really. It was a manic time for me, really, because obviously I was still on all the funerals and arrangements and everything. But on top of that, it was almost like daily visits across the road to make a decision about this or make a decision about that. And but it was all going fine. And we had a couple of big expensive things we had to do. Obviously, we had to put in a VIDI lift in there, and also a thing for circulating the air every half hour sort of thing kicks in, that sort of thing. But all was going good. But I did notice that the money was going down very quickly, and I thought, crumbs, we're going over budget here, which you do with everything, really. I think, building jobs, quite often you go over budget. So I thought, crumbs. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to go back to the bank manager. We might just need a little bit more here. So I went back to our bank manager, and I was told that, I'm sorry, he's very poorly at the minute. He's in hospital. But don't worry, there's this lovely young chap that's took his place while he's away. And my heart sunk a little bit. I thought, no, not again. So it's all right, okay. So I had a meeting with the new young chap, and he came over, and he had a look round, and he said, I don't know about this. He said, He said, well, put it this way, Mr. Bright. How many more funerals every year are you thinking you will get by having this new premises? And I said, none whatsoever. And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, why are you doing it? He said, surely you're doing it so you'll get more funerals. I said, no. I said, I don't think it will make a difference at all. I said, it's just that it'll make life easier for us. I said, we've outgrown Bridgend, but also we can give a far better service to everyone that we look after. He said, well, I'll put it to my bank, but we'll see. And of course, he come back and he said, no, sorry, we won't give you any more. So, crumbs, what do we do now? So I spoke to the builders. I saw them the other day, actually, David and Kevin, and the first time they knew what I actually said. But I said, look, we're going to have to put it on hold for a minute. I didn't actually say why. And so they did stop building for, it was a month or two or more, I think, while I juggled things around a bit. And of course, at the same time, I'd be on funerals, or I'd meet somebody in town and they'd say, oh, what's happening over your place? The builders have stopped. And I thought, well, I can't say, yeah, because I run out of money, because you'd get the rumour going round town, oh, crumbs, Bray's then gone bankrupt or something like that. So I had to think quickly. I said, yeah, blimmin' builders. And everybody said, oh, yeah, builders, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And it was only a week or two ago when I saw Kevin and David, and I told them that's what I'd said at the time. But so I had a few meetings and juggling around and getting things sorted, and we were then, well, a month or two later, we were all systems go again. So that was good. And I don't know how long it took, really. I think from the time we said we would buy it to the time we had the planning and then we had the building, I think it was about 4 years. It might not be. Somebody correct me on that, because time flies so quickly. Anyway, we had pretty much got it done. One good thing that happened was dear Phil that works for us. He would go over every week and just take photos of how things was progressing. And I've just looked now, because I knew there was quite a few photos, but if you go on our RJ Bray Facebook page and go on to photos, you'll see there an album which is Conversion of the Methodist Church. And there's actually 891 photographs in that album right from the start. You can see it. He took photos before we actually took it over, of how it looked before we started the work, right the way through, even the Sunday school room at the back. Very interesting, really. So if you want to have a geek at that, it will take up a day or two. No, it will take up a half hour of your time, but it is very interesting, really. So that was that. So once we getting near the time now, I thought, right, perhaps before we do properly move in, we'll have an open day. So I thought, I had it all geared up. I think it was the middle of December, I think it was. So I said to all the team, even the bearers, just the part-time bearers, everybody, I said, right, we can have an open day on a Saturday, 10 till 4. I want you all here, that if people come, to show you around. So we got loads of food in. We had the horse-drawn hearse up. We had the motorbike hearse there, the camper van hearse there, and everything. People could go everywhere, really, because, we were still working from across the road. And I remember dear John Moon, he said to Charlie, he said, well, what are us going to do all day? He said, there's all of us here. We're just going to be twiddling our thumbs. And I must admit, I was worried. I thought, oh, crumbs, who will turn up kind of thing. And I tell you what, they started coming in 10 o'clock in the morning. We was going flat out all day. And 'twas, say, early afternoon, we had to go over town for more food. 'Twas fantastic. And we had a couple of books there, visitors' books there, that we asked people when they come in, would they want to sign? And most of them did. And I think that weekend we counted up and we had over 600 signatures and comments from people that had actually come to look around. For work-wise, I think that was one of the best days of my life. It was a fantastic day. And we had our dear friend Jeremy Northcott there, who's sadly no longer with us. And he took loads of photos of the open day. And that album is on our Facebook page as well. And Lily, one of our maids, one of our childs, she was doing a bit of photography at the time. So he let her have the camera a bit as well. So some of the perhaps more abstract photos was Lil's kind of thing. But I'll say it was a fantastic day. Really was. And then we moved in the following week. So, as I say, 'twas a real roller coaster. It really was. And there was quite a few sleepless nights. I think the final bill, with everything from buying it, all the fees, the building, everything, the lift, whatever, I think it was about £1.2 million. But we haven't looked back, really. We now wonder how on earth did we manage when we was across the road. It's fantastic. And the lovely comments we get from people that come in, people come in to arrange funerals or come to funerals, and also people that come down from up country, perhaps other funeral directors and that, and suppliers. They're just blown away with it. So, we love it. we're over the moon with it, really. Oh, and also, before I forget, this obviously started with the hole in the roof. If you ever see the building, you can see we've got a lot of roof space. And one of the fantastic ideas at the time with the planning was that before we tarmacked over the car park, it was dug up and we had this blimmer great tank sunk into the ground under the car park. So all the rainwater that we get goes into this tank. So for all the washing of the cars and the flushing of the toilets, that's all done through the rainwater, which I thought was, a good idea, really. So I think that's about it. If I think of any other stories about that few years, I will put them on in future podcasts. But I hope you found it interesting. I say it was a real roller coaster, and it was a fantastic in the end, but crumbs, did I lose a few nights' sleep worrying about it in the meantime. But say, I hope you found it interesting. As for me Cornish word of the week, I was thinking back to the beginning when I was talking about all the nursing homes and that, and I say there was Dinah's nursing home down Padstow, and they changed their name to Anethiloan. So I thought perhaps that's what I'll use for my Cornish words this week. Aneth or Anethi, I think that roughly translates as home, and Loan is the Cornish word for happy. So it's roughly translated happy home. So that'll be me Cornish words. And for me dialect sort of thing, or Cornish sayings perhaps, seeing that we had the horses this week, I can always remember Father saying, like, sometimes if you was worried about your appearance, or there was a little minor detail or something that you was a little bit worried about, Father would look at me and say, nobody's going to stop their horses from galloping to look at that, or nobody's going to stop their horses from galloping to look at you, sort of thing. So that's what me Cornish saying will be for this week, which basically means, well, don't worry about a little thing like that, because nobody's going to worry about stop, look at that, sort of thing. So there we are. So anyway, that's it for this week. Sorry I've gone on a bit too long, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you have a happy rest of the Easter. I'll speak to you next week. Wish you well. Do Guinness.